Hello and welcome to Create a Landscape with Native Plants Your Neighbors Will Love. All of us want to have a beautiful landscape that inspires our neighbors, inspires the people around us, inspires our families, but we also want something that kind of aligns with social norms that might look neat and tidy. We've had this idea in our heads for many, many years, and to really be at the vanguard of native plant landscape design, we have to make sure that our landscapes inspire others. And part of that is having an intentional landscape design. So that's what we'll be going over in this presentation. I'm Lexi from Sag Marine Native Plant Community, and I'm here with Kathy.
Good evening, everybody. Yes, we are going to be talking about creating native plantings that your neighbors will love. Unfortunately, um, some of the gardens and some of the plantings that well-meaning people have done over the years have actually chased people away from native plants. A lot of people aren't ready to embrace the prairie in their home landscape. A lot of neighbors and towns aren't ready to embrace the tall grass prairie with 8-foot plants or 10-foot plants in the home landscape. And so that's what people think that native plantings are, but that is absolutely not what native plantings need to be. They can be much more sculptured and neat and tidy, and you don't have to go with the prairie look. That is one look, but that is not the only look that you can go with native plants. So we want to kind of give you some ideas of some other ways that might be more appealing to you and more appealing to your neighbors. And you know, we're not we care about what's in our own gardens, but we want to use those gardens and those landscapes to also try to encourage others. So we almost have to like scale back a little bit because we want to get the masses on board. That's how we're really going to make a difference. And by going all out and creating a full-fledged prairie on our property, that might not be the best route to bring other people in. So we're going to talk about some ways that we can do this and have beauty on our property that also is a big selling point to those around us. I think many people, the word is getting out there. We're sure trying to get the word out there. Many people are starting to acknowledge the importance of native plants on our local environment. It's pretty much been proven, and it's getting hard for people to deny. However, they may want to plant them around their homes, but they're really afraid to create a mini prairie that will be messy and cause their neighbors to complain. We know that that has happened over time where people have had, you've seen it in the news, people have had neighbors complain, people have had their towns come in, and luckily, at least in Illinois, laws are much more friendly to the native gardener now, so that's much harder for something like that to happen. But it's still, if that's the case, and it may not be inspiring the people around us that we would like to inspire. But there are ways that we can plant these native plants, and there are species of native plants where we can create amazing habitat and ecosystem while also being neat, tidy, beautiful, and inspiring our neighbors. Before we go on, I just want to ask you to please subscribe and like this video. It really helps out our channel, and then you will get updates whenever we come out with new content. And I also want to thank all of you for the wonderful comments and the wonderful questions that you give us on our videos. We just love reading those. It's just amazing. And we get some just amazing questions from you guys on planting native and native design and different species, and just some amazing questions that it's and we don't like to like gloss over them quickly in the comments, and it's almost like too much to just handle in the comments. And we thought, you know what, this would be great to do a live stream, just dealing with these great questions that people have. So what we have started to do, we do now have a membership. I believe the membership is $4.99 a month, and we have a monthly live stream just for members. And what we do on there is we share some new content. We do share some behind the scenes stuff about what's going on with us and what's going on with Sag Moraine. But mostly we're there to answer your questions, and we answer questions, great questions that we have found in the comments, and we'll also answer questions that people have live that evening. So if you're interested in getting more direct help and asking more questions and getting more specific with some of these questions that might be personal to your landscape, consider that membership, and you can find out more about that in our profile. Now, back to the interesting content.
So the word of the day today is scale. And actually, if we go back to that previous slide, I just want to show that one more time. That is a restored prairie at Piso Native Plant Nursery. This was all, stripped down land, and they actually restored this prairie, but it's 40 acres. And when you think about the plants in a prairie, they're all helping each other stand up. So the Monarda, standing up with some plant or compass plant, not quite sure which that one is,
I need
but
somebody to help me stand up.
right, that's
Lexi!
that would be nice, right? So yeah, we need some grasses to help us stand up. Um, but really, when we think about scale, these plants, a lot of them need that structure and that support and that vastness. But there's lots of small ones that we're going to look at that can exist totally on their own without needing help to stand up. So in our next slide, we've got a picture of the beautiful shrubby St. John's wort. And this is actually in bloom right now. I just planted 3 of these, and this is just such a stunner. We're going to go over several of these. And when you think about your landscape design, it really is so easy to incorporate these when you know the right plant for the right place and it has the right scale. So if you're tearing up all of your front lawn in front of your house, think about that square footage and what is actually going to work there. And that's what we're going to help you with tonight.
And look at that plant. That is full grown. So if you think that all native plants are huge and sprawling, that is totally not correct. There's so
And
many plants we can work with and have more manicured landscapes.
exactly. And the bees just love this thing. Every time I go up to it, there's bees all over it. Bumblebees, the cute, cute bees.
Oh, I love St. John's wort. So a pollinator garden can be created. It doesn't necessarily, you can create like a pollinator garden with many species, but you don't have to necessarily create it to look like a prairie. You can use certain species and make it look more like a cottage garden. And if you want more ideas for that, take a look at our video of how to create a cottage core garden with native plants. That will give you some great ideas of species to use, shorter species to get more of a look like this that doesn't look like a prairie, but looks more like, what would you call that? Like an English cottage garden?
Yeah, absolutely. And like this is such a trendy looking home. I mean, this must be a very expensive home. And the design of
Oh,
this
I
is
thought this was
just,
your house.
oh yeah, right. This is one of Piso's projects. They let us kindly use this photo, and I just thought, wow, what a fantastic example. I mean, this is like the house of our dreams, but like how beautiful they've done this kind of center island in their driveway, but then against the house, they've done more neat and tidy plants. So it's absolutely possible to balance it out and know where you have those tight spaces versus a bigger swath that you could plant in different ways.
And I noticed what another thing that they did here to create less of a prairie work look and more of a cottage garden look is there is large quantities of less species. So it's kind of a less is more, meaning like I can see, a lot of one species. And if you look by the front door, you can see that there is, I mean, I'm thinking that might be some hydrangeas over there. So I can't be 100% sure, but it might be some of our native hydrangeas. I think to the left of that is a redbud. But whatever those native shrubs are by the door, I mean, they're doing a lot of one species. So creating a lot of symmetry and not a lot of not as much busyness. And what stands out at me, and I am no architectural expert here, but there's very harsh lines on that home. A lot of squares and pointy triangles. And look at how that landscape with all of those lovely plants in more of a cottage style softens the whole look of that house.
It gives it so much more personality. I mean, if this was like
Yes,
your typical old school suburban landscape, it would look so boring.
it
But
would.
this looks exciting and alive and modern. I mean, I really think that that's the what native plants have going for them. They make every house look good and modern.
And
And
I,
that
and it feels like you would walk out of there and you can just like almost feel how different the air would be surrounded by that rather than if you just had, a few boxwoods along your house and nothing else.
right, which they don't really do well in our harsh winters anyway. So
No, no.
So we can
Hey,
landscape with native plants rather than create a native garden. So we wanted to talk about this difference between the two. And if you can see here, there's some hostas sneaking in. I think we all have them. They've been planted so profusely in all of our landscapes for so long. It's hard to buy a house that doesn't have
and
a
they're
lot of
not,
hostas.
and I'll say they're not a terrible plant. I mean, I'm not, the only plants that we think are just terrible are if they're an invasive species, and hostas aren't. And they did lovely for many years in shady places under trees. They looked lovely, huge swaths of them underneath trees. But there are so many native plants that could do the same thing and create amazing ecosystem. So, it's not they're not terrible plants, but there's a lot of plants that contribute so much more, right?
Yeah,
But
so it all
but
comes down to
hostas, the
scale.
slugs love hostas though. So the slugs will be mad if we don't plant hostas.
That's true. Mine have lots of holes in them, the hostas that I have. But really, I mean, you can if you don't have a lot of room, then maybe you would want to tear up your hostas so you could put in native plants and make sure you're getting the most bang for your buck with the land that you have. If you have a lot of space, you can always fill in with native plants. You don't have to go all or nothing. I think that is probably the hardest thing about the native plant movement is that there's so many people that are just kind of like all or nothing. You've got to rip it
Mhm.
all up and make that prairie, make that 40-acre prairie in a, 100 square foot garden. So we want to say that all in moderation. If you could just plant one or two plants this summer, that's great. Then you come back next summer and you keep filling in wherever you've got those bare spaces. And remember, any place that's just bare dirt it's going to be a lot better if it's got a plant in it. So definitely we don't want to perpetuate the invasive species, but give yourself some breathing room. If you like your hostas, it's okay.
Right. You don't have to replace them all. You don't have to do, like she said, because a lot of people, they just don't have the time or the interest, the money to do a whole upheaval. But just little changes and little additions and a plant here and a plant there and a tree there and a shrub here can start to just make a world of difference in a landscape. You can have your hostas if you love them, just don't have all hostas. So what is the difference between creating a native plant garden and landscaping with native plants? And a lot of us, and I know I did, I thought of native plants as always being that that garden with many species and kind of tall and blowing in the wind like a pollinator garden, like kind of like a prairie. That's what I thought of as native plants. And that is, a native pollinator prairie type garden. However, like we showed, you can also do more of a cottage type garden, and we have more information on that with another video. But you can also just landscape with native plants. And what that means is just putting in some native plants where you would put any other plant. If you're going to put a burning bush in the front of your house with some boxwoods. Well, maybe put some of these great little native shrubs instead and put a chokeberry, which has way better color than a burning bush, in my opinion. So maybe use those in front of your house. So you're just landscaping with a few shrubs, but you're making choices that are native, but it's still going to look just as neat and just as tidy and just as traditional. Also, if you have places in between existing plants, let's say you have your azaleas that aren't native, and then you have some boxwoods over there that aren't native, and then you have some daylilies over here. But do you have some place in between those things? Some, because for years, we've been landscaping where you put a plant and then you put 3 feet of mulch, and then you put a plant and then you put 3 feet of mulch. So there's a lot of mulch area out there. And maybe some of these great native plants could be clustered, like you could put a trio of purple coneflower between your boxwoods and your daylilies, or you could put a St. John's wort in front of the yews that you have planted, even though I think yews are kind of are they are native. I don't know if they're native here, but they're native in Illinois, I think. But so there's ways that you can just put either a grouping of smaller native plants or some smaller native shrubs into your existing landscape, and you don't have to pull anything out, just add to. And that's the difference between creating more of a all-in prairie pollinator garden like this and just adding some of these plants to your existing landscape, which will keep it more traditional looking, keep it more simple, keep it more tidy.
And we just wanted to show a full picture of this beautiful garden just because it is an inspirational image again from Piso, one of their projects. But this is a great example of a pollinator garden. This is really the grasses and the tall plants, and that might be the look you're going for if you've got the right space. But maybe there's, like Kathy was saying, there's something else that you want to do that looks a little bit more traditional. So again, just looking at scale. But isn't this pretty? You've got your echinacea, you've got your liatris, your black-eyed Susans, tons of different grasses in there. I just love this photo.
And looking at this, I want to say, I mean, I can see a walkway back there, and then we can see the like kind of like the wall of the porch. And if you do want more of the pollinator prairie-like garden like this, which I think is absolutely beautiful, nothing speaks of nature in many parts of the country than this. I mean, buzzing with pollinators, it's just spectacular. But you can have this look and still make it look neater and tidier and intentional to where your neighbors will embrace it. And some of the best ways to do that are to have pathways through it. Create pathways. You can create the pathways through with flagstone. You can create the pathways with mulch. And you can also have the pathways with lawn. You can have sod pathways. So rather than like if you're going to take out a section of lawn and create a pollinator garden like this, maybe just make a path in the center of it, keep the lawn there, and on either side create a garden. So that way you have an intentional mode path through it. And that instantly draws people in and makes it less threatening because it's accessible. They can get into it. It's not this massive tall plants that's intimidating. It's something that they can actually approach and go into. And so that makes people much more attracted to it. Another thing that can really help add intentionality and make gardens like this more attractive to the masses is simple things like adding a bird bath or adding a bench with some low plants or some flagstone around the bench, maybe a container. Those, those in the perception of the viewers turn this kind of a garden more into a garden as opposed to a prairie. So just think of it as a garden versus a prairie.
And another thing that we've really found too is, especially if you're just getting started and, all of these different species can be kind of overwhelming. If you limit it to maybe, three or four different species, like here, I think we've got some little blue stem just peeking out in the front. We've got black-eyed Susan and purple coneflower. Those are excellent plants, and we're going to follow up with them in a couple slides in this presentation. But even if you just had those, that would be a great place to start. And it's also easier to maintain because you know what those plants look like, what their leaves look like, what you'll start to learn what they look like when they come up as seedlings in the spring. So you know that they're not a weed, they're the plants that you planted intentionally. So that's another way that you can keep things more neat and tidy if that's the look you're going for, just by reducing the number of species.
Landscaping
So
with native plants refers to adding one or a grouping of a single species to bare areas in your existing landscape. Somewhere in your landscape, whether it's the back corner of your yard, in between your azaleas and your boxwoods in the front, over by the daylilies on the side, somewhere there's bare space that could accommodate a grouping, a trio, three or five of one species of native plants, and then you just have a cluster. And then maybe there's somewhere else on the other side of your landscape where you could have a cluster of something else. And then maybe there's room at the corner of your landscape where you could put a shrub. And maybe there's room in the center of your front yard where you could put a small native tree. And boom, you've created lots of habitat and you haven't removed anything that you had. And what you've done is now landscaped with native plants rather than created a pollinator garden. Um, and you're adding, I mean, not only are you adding so much more color and texture, but you're adding ecosystem value where there may have been none.
and this photo actually came from a viewer. Is that correct, Kathy?
Yes,
One of our
yes,
viewers' garden. And I mean, it's just so beautiful. I love the rocks in here, the different
yes.
textures, and it's just such a great example of, showing how natives can just fit right in.
You can see the sedges and you can see that beautiful columbine that is the showstopper in this photo. So it just looks so peaceful.
So this is another cool one that Piso let us use, and we wanted to show this larger specimen native plantings when it's kind of just a monoculture. And in this particular example, there were a bunch of invasive species where you see all of these ferns, and they did their restoration work and got rid of those invasive species. They might have actually done a burn on this too. I'm not 100% sure, but this is what popped up naturally. After they removed those invasive species, these ferns
Are
came
you
to
serious?
life. Yes. Isn't that crazy?
So they were there at one time and their seeds were in the seed bank and they just needed the ick to be removed above them to come back.
Exactly. Yeah. Once we get rid of the ick, like that was probably all buckthorn in there,
Right.
you know. And so they remove the ick, and then these beautiful plants can come to life. So, I think kind of the first step in these situations is see what you can do with restoration before just saying, "Oh, we have to start completely over from scratch," because you never know. You might get some beautiful surprises like this. And, sometimes this kind of monoculture is really, really beautiful. And it's, not the whole yard is monoculture and just ferns. There's probably some other things in there like Solomon seal peeking up in the shade and who knows, maybe even some May apples. But overall, this can just have such a phenomenal effect. And I think another great example of this would be in a bunch of sedges or like prairie dropseed. When you see all of those plants en masse together, it's a stunning textural effect, and it just does so much more than, your typical lawn would do. So another just great example of what is possible.
So there are many species of native plants and shrubs that can be simply added to your existing landscape. These are species that will look good in a cluster in any landscape. I don't care how formal you like your landscape, having a cluster of these is going to look lovely. These are just a few of the species that can be added to enhance a beautiful, neat, even formal landscape that your neighbors will love. For more ideas of plants that would be very good for any home landscape, regardless of how neat you want it, front of the house, back of the house, wherever, refer to our other video where we had Keith Sikora as a guest. That was some of the best native plants for the home landscape. And so he has a lot of species there that he likes working with in homes and in the front of homes to create more color and habitat and ecosystem value in even neat home landscapes. And we just wanted to pick up a little bit where he left off with some more species that are wonderful to landscape with and that your neighbors will love and that are amazing plants for our ecosystem. Well, you got to start here.
You can't go wrong with this one. This has got to be the easiest native plant to grow. Um, Either growing it from seed or, buying it and growing it in your garden. It's pretty interesting because it is actually a short-lived perennial, but it reseeds itself. So if you have purple coneflower in your garden, it will always have something on it. So it will have butterflies, it will have bees, it will have hummingbirds. And it's always a show to go out and look at your purple coneflower and see who is joining you in the garden. So the wonderful thing about this plant is that it looks great in any size garden. It looks great in a formal garden. It's got that typical daisy structure with the petals and then actually the little florets in the center of the flower. So, this is something that's very recognizable to people and looks very neat and tidy. It loves full to part sun, medium wet to medium dry soil. It grows 4 feet tall. It can sometimes even get a little bit taller than that, but it's going to bloom forever too, from July through September. And it's hardy in zones 4 to 8, native to the central and the eastern US, and just a phenomenal, phenomenal plant. I think when everybody well, at least in Illinois, thinks of native plants, they think of this plant, and we often call it our gateway drug to native plants. So here's just some fabulous examples of a monarch on the flower and a little hummingbird visiting. And this is our native range map showing just the great extent of this plant. But, shockingly enough, with how beautiful this plant is, this map is telling us that it is actually in decline in those yellow areas. That is, it's native to these whole areas, but in the yellow and the orange areas in particular, it's found less and less. So the more that we can plant this plant, the better. However, we do have to be cautious because this is one plant that has been cultivated like crazy. So if you go into your big box store, you might see purple coneflower with 2 flower heads, or they've changed the color to red, or they've changed the color to yellow. And while they may look pretty, they will not serve our pollinators as well as the straight species. So really, if you can, get the straight species into your landscape and you will just be wowed by the results. And, first year it will flower. It's just a phenomenal plant.
And I just want to mention, Lexi, that back in the day when I would garden before I knew about native plants, I planted many species of coneflowers over the years and many other cultivars that I know now were cultivars of native plants, different types of foxglove and different things like that. And I will say that I don't feel like the cultivars stand the test of time. They just don't. They just kind of dwindle after a few years. Whereas our natives, they they they're tried and true. They're used to our soil. They're meant to be here. So they just keep going. They don't disappear. They don't all of a sudden disappear after 3 years like many cultivars do.
And it's shocking. I went into a big box store just a couple days ago, and I saw the price for one of these cultivated purple coneflowers, and I think it was $9.99 a pint. And we can get plugs for $4 to $5. We can grow a whole packet of seeds for $3. Or we sell pints like at the plant sale that we just had, they were $7. So ultimately, cultivars, you're paying for whatever company it is that has cultivated that plant. They have a patent on that plant. They're making money off of our plants. So, it just kind of is one more thing. I would rather plant this straight species and know that it's going to support the pollinators.
I know that people didn't know early on, and for those of you out there, we are firmly on board that there are some cultivars that have some value to pollinators, that pollinators like some of them. But you don't want ones, for example, that where they've changed the flower shape or color, but if they've just changed possibly like the size of the plant or the disease resistance of the plant or something like that, there are some cultivars that pollinators do love. But by and large, the best things for our environment and for our pollinators and for other creatures are those straight species that they co-evolved with. And when you think of it, I mean, we didn't know for a while how much damage was being done by loading our landscapes with plants from Europe and Asia and cultivars, but now we know, and it almost is shocking when you think of how much money is being made on things that are actually harming our environment.
It is. It is really shocking. And I think when you start to look at it and you say like, wow, in this whole big box store, not one of these plants is a straight native plant species. They could be supporting local nurseries, um, but not one of them. And so many of them, they are still selling things that are very harmful to our environment, like Japanese barberry. Well, that's a host plant for ticks. Who wants ticks? So, yeah, you just have to have your eyes open. And I think that is one of the things once you get into natives is your eyes really start to open about what has happened, what's still happening, and the road we're on to try to correct things.
And that's why when you start planting some of these in your landscape, it loses, it can seem overwhelming and it can seem kind of depressing what has happened to our landscapes and with all these invasive species that have taken over our natural lands and so on. But when you start planting just a few of these on your property and you see the life come to them, all of a sudden it becomes just this wonderful, positive, empowering feeling that you're making a difference. Regardless of whether you can plant one plant or 100 plants, you're making a difference.
Absolutely.
All right, blue wild indigo. This is the landscaper's plant. This is I this could be a specimen the front and center of your home. This is just lovely. This is kind of the shrub that's not a shrub, but it grows up from the ground every year like a perennial. So you can cut it off. It's not a woody shrub that grows on old wood. It comes from the ground. But it takes on the form and the size of a shrub. So blue wild indigo will get about 3 to 5 feet tall in a nice big clump. Now it'll take 2 to 3 years for it to really start flowering and looking just amazing in the landscape because it does develop a pretty extensive taproot the first couple of years. Once it forms that taproot and it's done growing underneath the soil, then the beauty above the soil is just magnificent. And now you have a plant that you don't ever have to water and it just looks amazing. But that root goes so deep, you don't ever have to water. So just an amazing plant of the prairie that actually can look like a formal purple shrub in front of your house. And then it gets really cool looking black seed pods that are I've had more neighbors walk by and ask and comment on how beautiful the plant is with when the seed pods are on there, even more so than the flowers itself. So what blue wild indigo likes, full to part sun, medium to dry soil. It blooms in June to July, and it's attractive to so many pollinators and hummingbirds. I mentioned that long taproot, it's hardy in zones 3 to 10 and native to the central and eastern US. There we go, Baptisia australis. And you can see like right around us, there's a cluster where it is still found, but a lot of places it's receding. And the green, those are states where it is, at the state level where it is native. But the lighter green is the county where it is native and present. So it seems like there's big areas here where it is native, but whether it's present in any of those counties, I don't know. Maybe it isn't, or maybe they're just not reporting. I don't know about that. But here you can see just a few of the species that it is the host plant for, like our frosted elfin and the hoary, and that's even on, you can see that that is on blue wild or one of the native indigos, hoary edge, and the wild indigo dusky wing.
Just beautiful. And that's one that's good for a bigger space too. Like if you need to
Mhm.
fill up some room, and it'll take a while, so you have to be patient, but that reward after 2 or 3 years is just phenomenal. Once it's in bloom and you're seeing it, oh, it's actually in my background today too, but super cool plant. And people will ask you, what is that plant? Black-eyed Susan. Oh, I'm glad I got this one. Um, there are several different species of black-eyed Susan. This one is Rudbeckia hirta, and so this is a little bit on the shorter side. It's 1 to 3 feet tall. Now there's some other ones like sweet black-eyed Susan, showy black-eyed Susan. So they're all in the Rudbeckia family, but they all kind of have different traits. So this one in particular is a biennial, which means that it's going to self-seed itself and come back every 2 years. It'll come back every year, but it is a self-seeder. So, but there are other ones that are just straight perennials, and they're going to come back without needing that self-seeding. So, just take a look at that when you're thinking about the different species that you want to try. And the big difference too is just going to be in the height. So this one is definitely on the smaller side. The showy black-eyed Susan is also going to be on the shorter side. The sweet black-eyed Susan would be on the taller side. So if you wanted to put that like in a backyard or against a fence, that would do really well with someplace that needed height. Um,
Can I just
black-eyed,
add something
oh
here?
yeah.
I have a sweet black-eyed Susan coming up in my landscape on its own this year, and I don't have anywhere else on the property.
Oh, you're kidding.
No, so like where did this guy come from?
Maybe it
It's so
came from
cool.
my house.
Did you bring it on your shoe?
Maybe. I grew a whole tray of them. They need to get into the ground. I just love them so much. So,
I mean, I know they're taller and I struggle because it's not like really coming up in the best place, but I was shocked by the foliage of that is really cool.
so cool. Yeah. I mean, some of them have like kind of hairier leaves. The sweet
Yeah.
black-eyed Susan, not as much the hairy look. So, and
And the
then
leaves, the leaves seem more decorative to me or something.
yeah, it's a cool plant. And I love how tall it is. It does really nicely get next to some grasses too. So, but the wonderful thing about the black-eyed Susans is just how long they're going to bloom for, and whose neighbor doesn't like seeing some beautiful yellow plants in the yard? I mean, if you think about the popularity of the yellow daylilies over the years, I think people just love yellow. It cheers them up, and it just looks bright and summery. And so why not replace those daylilies with the black-eyed Susans? Now, those short daylilies are not as big of a problem as those. Are they orange or tiger?
Yeah, those
They're
what they call ditch lilies or
the
whatever. Like,
yeah, the ditch lilies, those do escape cultivation and can be found in our wild areas. So we definitely don't want to promote the use of those. So replace things with this beautiful plant, and this is native to the eastern and the central US and will bloom for months, June through September. And look at that native range. I mean, it's almost the whole country. How cool is that? So, a lot of people can plant this plant. It becomes very recognizable in the landscape. Again, with that daisy structure, that's something that, lots of people are going to, feel affinity with, and they like the shape of those flowers. And then also, you're going to support our birds. So, not only our pollinators, but this is an American goldfinch eating seeds off of the black-eyed Susan. So, just let those flower heads, dry up, and then in the winter, our birds will have a nice little feast.
Look at the look on his face. Doesn't it look like he's saying something like, yeah, plant this plant for me, will ya?
Yeah.
Get with it. Another one amazing in any landscape, even if you wanted a landscape that is as neat as a pin, put a little section of maybe three of these little mop heads in a cluster somewhere in your landscape. It'll be adorable and it'll add so much texture and movement. Just lovely. I mean, who look at that? It's like a little gremlin. They're so cute. I just love prairie dropseed. Um, it likes full to part sun, medium wet to dry soil. It only grows to be 2 feet tall and it blooms August through October. It's a wonderful clump forming grass and it's best propagated by dividing dense clumps. So you can grow a little bit of this and I guarantee you're going to love it. And maybe then you decide you want to put another little cluster of it on the side of your house. Well, in a couple years, just divide it and you can spread it around to other places. Um, the seed heads that come up, they do have a very distinct fragrance, a very pleasant fragrance. Some say it smells like buttered popcorn. I don't know if I think it smells like buttered popcorn, but I like the smell very much. It's hardy in zones 3 to 9 and native to the central US. There we go. I'm so glad that it's native where we are. And we do have some amazing plants in the center of the country, just saying.
We're not biased or anything.
Um, and it is the host plant for the Dakota skipper, among other species, but that particular species is endangered. So we need to get some prairie drop seed in the ground so the Dakota skipper can lay its eggs on it.
Isn't that amazing? These tiny little creatures, and they need this plant. It's just really fascinating.
And I just want to say something like with the grasses, a lot of people, and I was very guilty of this years ago. If I had space, I wanted it to be filled with something that had color because I didn't want to like waste the room on something that wasn't going to bloom because I wanted as much color as possible. When you have plants with color and then you intersperse it with some of these grasses that have movement and like varying shades of green or like this with the shades of blue, it actually makes your flowering plants pop more and show up more. Otherwise, they just get kind of lost in this mass of hodgepodge. But these green grasses keep it all looking neater and make and actually showcase the flowers of the flowering plants. Like putting a frame around a picture.
Exactly. Yeah. And actually, that's what I'm planning on doing with Little Blue Stem against my driveway. I'm going to use it to line my driveway because this is a
Ooh.
great salt tolerant plant. So, places that you need an edge or a border, consider these grasses. They're really, really spectacular. And they don't get that tall either. This is
Mm-mm.
only 2 to 3 feet tall, Little Blue Stem. There is a big blue stem if you're looking for something bigger. But this is an awesome one, full to part sun. Most of our grasses love full sun. And this is going to bloom July through October. And when we say bloom, it means that it gets these tiny little blooms that turn into the seeds. And then it turns a spectacular color in the fall too. So not only do you get this beautiful, vibrant color during the summer, but you're going to get some fall color as well. And this does spread well via seed. It is definitely tolerant of poor soil and those salt conditions. It doesn't like tall competition, so I wouldn't plant some huge plants next to this, but it is native to most of the US and Canada.
Look at that native range.
Oh, I just love that. I just want to do a live stream of like the plants that can bring us all together. Oh, so this one is a host plant also for the dusted skipper and the cobweb skipper. So these little creatures need this plant in order to survive, and so we want to plant it to keep them around.
The cobweb skipper doesn't like doing housework.
Oh, really?
That's why there's cobwebs all over their house.
And the dusted skipper is good at dusting. Housework's on the back burner right now until the garden is
Oh
done.
yeah, I'm like, yeah. All of these, amazing, amazing. I don't care how neat you want your landscape. Oh my goodness, if you have an area where you can put a cluster of wild geranium, just an awesome plant. This is a common woodland native plant with pinkish purple flowers, and the, the flowers are adorable. But look at the foliage on that. It has lovely foliage and it holds its foliage all season. So it's just always like a wonderful little clump of pretty foliage green. And then when it's blooming, it's spectacular. It attracts many bees and butterflies when it's blooming in April, May, June, and July. And it is a very important early season bloomer for those early emerging pollinators. So it is a great early season plant for them. It likes part sun to full shade. So this is one of the ones that if you have a shady area, let's say along your house that doesn't get much sun, or under a little tree or around some big shrubs, this would be a great plant to put a cluster of 3, 5, 7 of these and just form a little carpet in one section that is a mound of this pretty foliage. That would just be lovely. It likes medium dry soil and it tolerates a range of soil types. It's a very adaptable plant, only gets to be 12 inches tall, and the growth rate is a moderate mound forming plant. It's the larval host plant for the white-marked tussock moth. It is a deer-resistant plant and native to the eastern and central U.S., hardy in zones 3 to 8. So there's that white-marked tussock moth, and that's one of the species that it is the host plant for. We like to show, we can't show them all, but we like to show at least one. And there you go, a nice big native range too.
I just have one of these right now, but mine is still blooming. Is yours still blooming?
I do still have blooms, yes.
I was kind of surprised because I thought June might be the end of it, but yeah, it's still going. Super happy.
I love that plant.
Me too.
It has just a great growth habit. It just mounds. It doesn't blow in the wind or fall over the sidewalk or whatever. It just mounds with pretty foliage and looks great anywhere.
It stays where it's supposed to.
And it stays where you put it. Yes.
Oh, this is another one. I have a neighbor across the road, and it's fun when you discover like, oh, my neighbor might be into native plants too. And I keep like peeking in their garden because this is the first year that I've been here. And I'm like, oh wow, what's coming up now? And now their coneflowers are in bloom, but they had like just a mass of bluebells. And it was the most beautiful thing I think I've ever seen. It was just stunning. I know you love them too, Kathy.
I
They are
do. I love these guys.
such a
They,
cool plant.
they glow. I mean,
They glow. Yeah. And theirs are planted under a bunch of trees, and it just looks absolutely beautiful. And it's the first sign of spring. So it is true. They are an ephemeral and they start out as this kind of pinky lilac color and then they turn into this beautiful shade of blue. They like part shade to shade. They like medium to moist soil, and this is going to be one of your first bloomers in April and it goes into May. Then it'll just kind of die back because it's an ephemeral. So the leaves will kind of just disappear into your landscape, and then they actually serve as food for other plants as they kind of decay and go and die back. So bumblebees just love these flowers, as do our beautiful swallowtails. And the spring butterflies are just going to come and pollinate these plants and, get excited about these plants. It's one of their first food sources. So,
Since I put these in every spring, I see the queen bumblebees come that have been hibernating all winter, and they come for this early food source. So now I always get queens, and it's really an experience to see those early season queens because they're huge. They're just huge, and you know that they're about to go start their colony, and it's so cool. And they come out of hibernation and they find your bluebells, and it's like, oh, build your colony nearby, please.
yep, it's nice to know you gave them some food.
Right.
So this is mostly in the eastern and the central US that it is native to, but for sure you're going to see swallowtails and bumblebees on this plant, and their long tongues are just made for these flowers. It's just phenomenal. Look at its little cute head stuck in there.
Okay, let's talk about some amazing, tidy, smaller shrubs that are great in any kind of landscape and even a formal landscape. And if you want even more information on shrubs, check out our video, Native Shrubs for Small Spaces, because that is also, we do a deeper dive into more species of shrub. But we want to just touch on some of the best species to put in more of a formal landscape and or a traditional landscape, and that you can put anywhere around your where you have a blank space or just an area of mulch. So this is an I know we say this about everything, but this is truly an amazing shrub, and it stays nice and tidy and small. It only gets to be 3 to 6 feet tall in full sun to part shade, so it's very adaptable. The cool thing about this, one of the best things about this is its gorgeous red autumn leaves. I really do believe that it is way more attractive than burning bush. So this is a great substitute for the invasive burning bush, and it also stays smaller than the burning bush, so you don't have to trim it as often. It blooms in May and June with these gorgeous white flowers, and then it gets the most nutritious berries that there are, aronia berries, and they're a little bit astringent. That's why it's called chokeberry. So you may not want to eat it by itself. You can mix it in with maybe some sweeter berries, but people do like to eat these even though they don't taste real good, because the reason they don't taste real good is because they are one of the highest berries and antioxidants that there is. So there's so many antioxidants in there that they're kind of astringent. But I don't get them because the robins eat them before I can get out there, and that's okay. They come first. Um, it is also the larval host plant for some at-risk species of butterflies and moths. It's a good plant to stabilize soil and prevent erosion in both wet and dry locations because it is so adaptable. It can grow in wet or dry. Very low maintenance shrub, very low maintenance shrub. Oh my gosh. And the foliage is just really lovely. Um, Foliage on this too. I absolutely, I wish I had more room for more of these. I'm just crazy about this shrub. It's great for any landscaping, including a formal landscape, very salt tolerant, and I know this as I have it right along my driveway. There's you can see the all three showstoppers. You can see the beautiful flowers and then the berries that form, and then that awesome fall color that's a combo of red and like copper. It's just it just really is stunning in the fall, and I feel like the color lasts longer than the burning bush too. So just awesome. And here you can see it's native to the eastern US, and just an awesome plant. Won't disappoint.
And here we've got another shrub, dwarf bush honeysuckle. This was very popular at our plant sale this year, which I was super excited to see. And this is a short shrub and it is a native honeysuckle. You have to be very careful of these invasive honeysuckles that are kind of all over the place now. I think people planted them, back in the 80s because they would grow so quickly and people wanted to fill in the landscape quickly. But unfortunately, it's become a problem. And so if we can get this one back in our landscape, this supports our native bees. They love these flowers, again, kind of like a trumpet tubular style flower. It's also good for stabilizing areas that might be prone to erosion. So another great use of our native shrubs, our native grasses, is to help with those areas like that might be on a slope or might be prone to erosion. So this one is only 2 to 5 feet tall, so it's not a huge shrub. Again, great for a small space, great for a front yard, likes full sun to part shade, medium moisture, and this is going to be an early bloomer, June to July. It's going to attract all the pollinators and also nectar for hummingbirds. Hummingbirds love honeysuckle, and it produces these little capsule-like fruits. And the leaves will also turn a nice color into the fall. And again, it's drought tolerant, which is crazy that it can prevent erosion. It's drought tolerant, and it's also providing all these resources for our pollinators. So this is one of my favorite photos of this plant because you can see how it can really make a great edge, to fill in some space. It's going to cover in nice and full and cover that ground, but also be this low-lying shrub, giving it a little bit of height. It's just an awesome plant for landscaping. And here you can see its native range. It's a little bit on the lesser side, but in the upper northeast, that is where you're going to find this shrub. And it is also the host plant for two very, very cool moths. So the laurel sphinx moth and then the snowberry clearwing moth. If you've ever seen one of these clearwing hummingbird moths or the snowberry one, they're just the most enchanting little creatures. They look like a hummingbird, but they're actually a moth, and you'll just see them hovering, getting nectar from the flowers, and they're just so beautiful.
She's got a pretty face.
So pretty, isn't she?
She knows it too. Lead plant, lead plant, lead plant, one of the original shrubs of the prairie. Again, another plant with an amazing taproot. So it takes a while to get going, but once it does get going, you won't disappoint. And it's such a unique, amazing plant with that unique bluish foliage and then those purple spikes that come up. This is you don't see it often anymore, and it is a real showstopper if you have a little bit of patience and let it grow that taproot over the first couple of years, and then it'll start to put on a show for you. And because it has that taproot, you won't ever have to water this guy. It only grows to be 2 to 3 feet tall in full sun, medium to dry soil, and it blooms in June and July. Mine just started blooming the last couple days. I have two of these. One I planted about 3 years ago, and 4 years ago, and it started blooming for me last year. So now and it's a stunning plant. There's nothing else like it. I mean, it's really, really cool. It's a keystone plant, which means that it has a very significant positive impact on our ecosystem, largely because of how many species it's a host plant for. As we said, it's a shrub of the prairie. It can even survive fires and burns. It's slow to develop. One thing you do want to do is protect it from rabbits and deer in the first couple of years until it gets a little bit of growth on it. I did that not by caging. I did it inadvertently by planting sedges around one of them and mountain mint around the other. And the sedges, rabbits don't like sedges, and rabbits don't like plants in the mint family. So I planted things around my lead plant that rabbits don't like by accident, and they never ate my lead plant. It's hardy in zones 3 to 8, and it's native to the central US. And here's just a few of the species that it is a host plant for. Again, it's a keystone species, so it breeds a lot of life, that's for sure. The lead plant flower moth, that's a cool moth. It doesn't even look like a moth, kind of. How beautiful is that? The eastern tailed blue, the southern dog-faced sulfur, and the silver spotted skipper. Those I have seen for sure. The silver spotted skipper, I see those every year.
And the eastern-tailed blue. Well, actually, it's hard to tell that one apart from the spring azure and the summer
Summer
azure.
azure.
They all look the same.
They all look the same to me. If anybody knows a good way to tell them apart, please let us know in the comments.
Ah, New Jersey tea. This is such a cool little shrub. It's very compact. Again, for the small space, this is really fantastic. And these tiny little flowers are just pollinator magnets. So you could plant some of this alongside some shrubby St. John's wort. You know, they're about kind of the same size. They like the same sort of conditions, fold apart sun, and they like medium to dry soil. So you can't go wrong with these little shrubs. It also has a deep taproot that makes it drought tolerant. Super attractive to our pollinators and hummingbirds. And this is going to bloom a little bit later in July and August. It's super long lived. And then it should be protected also from the rabbits, just like the lead plant. So either try Kathy's sedge and mint trick, or you're going to need to put some protection around it while it gets established. It is also a larval host plant to more than 40 species of butterflies and moths. So again, just one plant. You know, some people say, "Oh, I've only planted a few plants." That's great. Any plant is an improvement in our landscapes and in our ecosystem. And you're just going to be surprised by how much beauty and uh, how many pollinators they bring to the garden.
You can be sure that those butterflies, caterpillars that are feeding on that plant aren't saying, "Oh, she needs more plants here," or he should have planted more species. All they have is, no, they're just so happy you planted New Jersey tea.
That's right. And here's the spring azure, which or maybe it's the summer azure. I'm not quite sure what this picture is of. But you can
It's
tell
one of
they
those azores.
is one of those blue ones. You know, they all just kind of look the same. Um, but again, this is native to the eastern and central US, and the reason it's called New Jersey tea is because people actually made tea out of its leaves. I believe when they were boycotting tea from England, so it's called New Jersey tea.
Smooth hydrangea. Mine are blooming now and they're putting on a great show. I have four of them along my garage. And as we've talked in other talks, if you have heard it, the big poofy hydrangeas, those are poofy hydrangeas. The flowers on our native hydrangeas look more like lace. They're kind of considered a lace cap flower. So whereas the poofy hydrangeas that you see, the cultivars that you normally see, they have all these big flowers that make up a big poof. The lace cap ones will have just a few of those larger flowers, but most of them will be like little tiny flowers. And so the difference between the few big flowers and all the little flowers is what gives it more of a lace cap appearance. But it's only those little tiny flowers that actually have a payload of pollen and nectar. The big flowers are sterile and they don't give anything. They just attract the pollinators into the plant. And then they find the small flowers that have all of the nutrition. So the cultivated hydrangeas, like your big Annabelles with the poofy flowers, or all of those pink hydrangeas, then blue hydrangeas that are all made up of those big flowers, they may attract the pollinators, but the pollinators are not finding anything when they come. So I think it's kind of a tease. But our native hydrangea arborescens, is a stunning plant that will be loaded with pollinators. I have tons of them on there now, especially bumblebees. Grows 3 to 4 feet tall in shade to part shade. medium soil with consistent moisture. These are nectar-rich flowers that are loved by pollinators. It blooms May through July with occasional flowers appearing until September. So it'll bloom, it'll give its heavy bloom, but then when it's done blooming, it'll give you some green growth. And whenever there's new green growth, then you'll get another flower. So it'll flower sporadically through the rest of the season. Hardy in zones 3 to 9. It will also grow under black walnut trees. And for those of you who have black walnut trees around your home, you know that it is difficult to find plants that will thrive under those. It is a larval host plant to the hydrangea sphinx moth. And as I said, the dainty lace cap flowers are just really beautiful. It is, excuse me, it is native, as you can see here, to the eastern US. And we're really the border of this, I would say. And there you can see the lace cap looking of the flowers. You can hear in this photo, you can better see what those large flowers look like. Those are just beacons or lighthouses to draw in the pollinators, but all of the food is in those little tiny flowers. So picture the big poofy hydrangeas. They're all made up of the flowers that just draw you in, but don't feed you, which doesn't seem very nice. And there's a photo of the hydrangea sphinx moth. I don't
They're
like
just
to
coming.
judge plants, but that seems kind of like a tease to me to be drawing in pollinators and not giving them anything.
I know, isn't it annoying? Like it seems like there's more cultivators too, or cultivars that are trying to mimic the lace cap look of our smooth hydrangea.
Yeah,
So don't be
now
fooled.
can't we just leave it the way it's meant to be and then the pollinators will be much happier? Why do we have to keep messing and then we all come full circle? Oh, wouldn't it be, now that we've had poofs for like 40 years, wouldn't it be interesting to have lace cap flowers? That's what we originally had. Thank you.
Yeah, it's just crazy marketing. So we've got shrubby cinquefoil. This one again is a little short plant and it's a beautiful yellow flower and it only grows to 3 feet tall, full to part sun. Um, and for the most blooms, you definitely want it in full sun. This blooms forever from June into October, so that
Wow.
is amazing. And the leaves, I believe, are kind of like on the thicker, like succulent kind of looking side. They are more like waxier looking kind of leaves than like our shrubby St. John's wort. This is considered deer and rabbit resistant, and it is also a larval host plant for two species of specialist bees. So again, this is why these shrubs are just so important because they are made for these specific creatures. It's also a larval host plant for 18 species of butterflies and moths. So here again, oh, I can only plant one plant, Imagine all the good you can do with just one plant.
Really, those specialist bees, and that means that it's a bee species that can only feed its young, only feed its larva, the pollen from one species of plant. And so there's two species that can only feed their young the pollen from cinquefoil. So if that's all you plant in your yard, you're still going to make those two species of bees very happy campers.
And this one is definitely more on the western side of the country. So it's nice to see some of those plants. And here you can see those specialist bees, the rose miner bee, and then this other miner bee that they need this plant in order to survive. So again, very important to make sure this plant remains in our landscapes.
Another gorgeous yellow blooming small shrub that would look great in even your most formal landscape is our shrubby St. John's wort. And this only grows 4 feet tall and 4 feet wide. Imagine you have a little area, corner of the front of your house, and you just want to put a nice small mounded pop of color. This would work wonderful for you. In full to part sun, medium to moist soil, it's very easy to keep this pruned into a nice small rounded shape. Loved by pollinators, as you can see that attractive species of bumblebee that is hovering over it in the photo to the left. Its seeds provide great winter bird food. So you're going to be bringing in the pollinators, you're going to be bringing in the birds. It's a very adaptable, hardy shrub. It's a really tough shrub, and it blooms in June, July, August, hardy in zones 3 to 8. It is best to prune shrubby St. John's wort in early spring because it grows on new wood. So that's the best time of year to prune it. It's a larval host plant for the gray hair streak and more than 20 other species of butterflies and moths, and it also is deer and rabbit resistant. There we go. It is native to the eastern US. There's a photo of the gray hair streak butterfly, and another species that it is the host plant for is the wavy lined emerald moth.
Oh, we made it through all of our plants, Kathy.
Wait, we have to give credit where credit is due. Why can't I get the other? I don't know. I'm having computer issues here, so I'm just not going to mess with it. I'm going to leave it like it is. But thank you all for joining us, and remember, doesn't matter if you want a neat landscape, whether you want a prairie garden or you want a cottage garden, less species, more of them, certain species. Check out our video on creating a cottage core garden. But you can also have a very neat, tidy, formal, traditional landscape, and you can landscape with native plants. You don't have to just create a native garden.
Thanks so much for joining us. We'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.